mysterious Roman relics found in Brazil. In the southeast of Brazil, there's a place called Guanabara Bay. It's close to Rio de Janeiro and is the second largest bay in all of Brazil. There isn't that much special about the bay, other than various relics from ancient Rome that were discovered 15 miles from the shore, buried under 100 feet of water. If you know anything about history, you'll know there should not be any ancient Roman artifacts anywhere near Brazil. The Romans never made contact with Brazil. They had no knowledge of South America at all, and yet the relics somehow made it across the world anyway. The strange archaeological discovery was made in 1976 by lobster divers, who discovered a jar encrusted with barnacles at the bottom of the bay. These turned out to be amphorae, ancient jars used by the Greeks and Romans to carry things like wine or grain during voyages across the sea. Then, in 1982, treasure hunter Robert Marks tried to find more precious objects. With permission from the Brazilian government, a team of experts began scanning the bay using sophisticated sonar technology. The team found over 200 more amphorae. Tests proved that they'd been down there in the muck for thousands of years. They probably came from the 2nd century Rome, even though the first Europeans didn't make it into Brazil until the year 1500. That would be about 1700 years after the jars were made. To this day, nobody has any idea how the mysterious jars made it all the way to Brazil. If a broken vessel had somehow gotten blown across the sea, or if Roman voyagers made it across the Atlantic but couldn't find their way back, nobody knows the truth. Unusual burials. 2 headless skeletons were unearthed inside an old cemetery in Georgia, the country, not the state. Excavations carried out by a team of archaeologists from Georgia and Poland revealed 16 graves from the late Bronze Age and early Iron Age, or from between the 13th and 6th centuries BCE. Out of all the graves, the most bizarre was that of a man and a woman buried together, both curled on their right side as if spooning. King of romance. Until they realized the couple just so happened to be missing their heads. And the woman's skeleton had bronze arrowheads in it, one stuck in the leg and the other stuck in the ribs. Researchers believe that she had likely been killed in a hail of arrows. There was also an iron dagger, a bronze pin, and some ceramics found inside the burial. No one is really sure why the couple were beheaded prior to their entombment, but archaeologists did find a random skull inside of another tomb, placed on a ceramic plate. This skull had no body present, and researchers don't know what to make of it. Did it belong to one of the pair that was missing their heads? They know the cemetery was probably used by farmers and warriors alike over a period of at least 700 years. According to researchers, the large amount of weapons discovered most likely means that the people buried there were no strangers to fighting. Weapons, along with bones and artifacts, have been found in most graves, which indicates a strong militarization of the community. The oldest weapons. The oldest known weapons in the world are javelins, which are essentially spears made with carved stone tips for impaling. These super ancient weapons were recently discovered in Ethiopia and date back 280,000 years. The reason this could change history is that they predate the earliest known fossil of Homo sapiens, also known as human beings, by roughly 80,000 years. Plus, these newly discovered weapons are at least 200,000 years older than any other similar weapons found. What this suggests is that our ancient ancestors, the species that predated our own, figured out how to make complex throwing projectiles. You could almost think of it like if monkeys started using weapons and fashioning knives. Sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie like Planet of the Apes. That's how huge this discovery is. The stone tools were found on the side of a collapsed volcanic crater in Ethiopia's Rift Valley, an area which scientists believe was the original cradle of civilization. Between 125,000 and 780,000 years ago, the area would have been on the shores of a huge megalake, where hippos and other wild animals congregated. According to National Geographic, the researchers found at least 141 obsidian artifacts here, all of which were spear tips. Before now, researchers thought Homo sapiens were the ones who learned how to use projectile weapons. But now it looks like they were being used for tens of thousands of years previously. The reason this is such an important discovery is that crafting projectiles empowered the first human hunters to strike from a distance, therefore giving us our first and most important advantage over other species. That stone javelin, 280,000 years ago, would turn a rock into a sling, an arrow, and eventually a bullet. Prehistoric animal carvings. For the first time in Scotland, prehistoric animal carvings have been discovered hidden inside an old burial cairn dating back 5,000 years. According to Historic Environment Scotland, the carvings were made inside Doncreg Cairn, one of the more famous burial sites in Scotland. The carvings come from either the Neolithic or early Bronze Age, and they show 2 red deer, which back then were the largest species of deer in the region. These deer were very important to the earliest Neolithic communities of Scotland. The ancient people ate their meat, used their hides to make shelter and clothing, and used their bones and antlers for tools and weapons. These carvings are now the oldest example of drawn animals by ancient people anywhere in the UK. They were scrawled on the capstone of the ancient burial chamber, suggesting whoever was buried inside was a respected member of the community and a skilled hunter of red deer. It's important to note that there are a lot of carved rocks in Scotland, about 3,000 that date back to prehistoric times. But these are mostly carvings of abstract rings and other strange symbols. Almost none of them actually depict living beings. The Franklin Expedition. For the first time ever, archaeologists have finally identified the skeleton of a man from a very special shipwreck. The shipwreck was found in Canada between 2014 and 2016, in the Northwest Passage. It was part of the Franklin Expedition sent in 1845 to map out the area. The HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror were both stranded in ice during the expedition, resulting in one of the most horrific shipwreck disasters in history and resulting in 129 deaths. Those on board slowly and miserably died, possibly after resorting to cannibalism. It has been called the greatest loss of life event in the history of polar exploration. In any case, Canadian archaeologists discovered the haunting remains of 2 sailors near Erebus Bay, and they have believed for quite some time that they probably belonged to members of the Franklin Expedition. DNA and geological analysis confirmed that the skeletons belonged to a man named Warrant Officer John Gregory. He was an engineer on board the HMS Erebus and is thus far the first member of the crew to be positively identified. This is thanks to a Canadian team from the University of Waterloo who helped to match the DNA found on the skeleton with John Gregory's great-great-great-grandson, who currently resides in South Africa. This new evidence is shedding some new light on the bedeviled voyage and appears in the science journal Polar Record. Neolithic history. Scientists have discovered some unique artifacts in Papua New Guinea that could be rewriting the Neolithic history on the island. About 10,000 years before today, the climate on Earth changed. It became a lot easier to plant crops. This initiated a Neolithic revolution all across the globe. The ability to plant crops and stop being nomadic is what resulted in the first societies of Europe and Asia as people began staying in one area and farming. For a long time, scientists have been under the assumption that certain areas of the world never experienced this blossoming of society, such as Papua New Guinea. But new artifacts discovered are actually suggesting that the people here began to farm, craft tools, and partake in arts and crafts at the same time as the people in Europe and Asia. According to archaeologist Ben Shaw from the University of New South Wales, the local early cultures of Papua New Guinea planted a wide variety of crops, including yams and bananas. In 2016, researchers found a whole stash of amazing artifacts, including stone pestles, tools for lighting fires, and even a carved stone face. These artifacts are between 4,000 and 5,000 years old, suggesting there may have been a highly advanced island culture living on Papua New Guinea, which could have rivaled the earliest civilizations anywhere in Europe or Asia. It's not clear exactly what may have happened to this civilization or where the rest of these artifacts are hidden, but this is definitely changing the way historians see the small, isolated island and its people. Elite women. Researchers from Spain recently analyzed the contents of a tomb discovered in 2014 at the archaeological site of La Amaloya. The person buried here belonged to the El Argar society that flourished between 2200 and 1550 BCE. They developed the first state organization anywhere in the Western Mediterranean. This newest study has proved that women may have played a crucial role in the governance of the civilization. Here's the deal with the burial. It was found to contain the body of a man between the ages of 35 and 40 and a woman between the ages of 25 and 30. Beside them was a pile of prestigious objects, many embellished with silver and almost all of them probably belonging to the woman. She was buried with a huge treasure of jewels and personal objects like necklaces and bracelets. She was also found with a silver diadem on her skull. Researchers have gathered that she was probably more important than the man she was buried with. Plus, researchers have already found other tombs containing what appears to be very rich women. All clues point to a society potentially ruled by wealthy females, perhaps making up the entirety of the dominant ruling class. The Island of Death. There is a forgotten island located off the coast of Kent, known widely as Dead Man's Island. It's heaped with human skulls, human bones, and empty coffins. It is said to be the most haunting and frightful place in all of the United Kingdom. As of right now, there are no visitors permitted to step foot on Dead Man's Island. If you went to this place, you would find human remains everywhere you looked. But why is there an island in the United Kingdom filled with human bones? It's because, 200 years ago, the island was used to bury convicts who died aboard prison ships. But because the water levels have been rising, people have been discovering unmarked graves and bodies at the surface, reaching for fresh air like zombies. The coastal erosion and shifting tides have caused fragments of skulls and bones to stick out from where they had once rested 6 feet or 1.8 meters under. Dead Man's Island is out of bounds because it's been labeled as a site of special scientific interest by Natural England. This means you can forget about going to dig up those old bones, no matter how curious you are. Even if you could visit this island, would you really want to? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, hit that thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Amazon warrior woman. Researchers at a small museum inside of the University of Mississippi were shocked when they recently discovered the figure of an ancient Amazon woman painted on the side of a cylindrical box dating back 2,500 years. The box was once used for keeping cosmetics and jewelry. The image shows a female warrior on horseback, armed with a lasso and a battle axe. The Amazon is fighting a Greek enemy soldier who tries to avoid the Amazon's attacks by ducking behind his shield. But what's really shocking about the image is that, according to scholar Adrian Mayer, it's the first ancient artistic image of an Amazon woman using a lasso in battle. It really makes you wonder where they got the idea for Wonder Woman and her lasso, right? Adrian also said that the image on the box gives some previously unknown information on the females of the day, as it suggests women enjoyed scenes in which powerful Amazons bested Greek warrior men. It could be that since the box was used probably to keep makeup, ancient Athenian women thought of themselves as Amazons in a way, as they prepared themselves for the arduous day to come. The image was painted on the box in Athens sometime between 480 and 450 BCE, but it has more serious implications than just supporting a positive self-image for women. It also means that whoever painted the picture was aware of the ancient Scythians and their warrior women who rode horses into battle and carried lassos. Golden Cannonball. Aaron Smith was exploring around Yorkshire in the British town of Whitby when he discovered a shocking golden cannonball with something even more amazing hidden inside. Aaron was only 22 years old when he made the discovery. After finding the perfectly round and very shiny ball, he realized all signs pointed to it containing a fossil. And Aaron is no noob when it comes to fossils. He hunts at least twice a week through local areas known to be rich in fossils. While the golden cannonball may have looked like a solid ball of metal, it actually opened quite easily. Aaron split the cannonball open to discover a fossil dating back 185 million years. The fossil was that of an ammonite. Ammonites were ancient cephalopods that lived between the Devonian period and the Cretaceous period, or 419 to 66 million years ago. They're frequently found fossilized on beaches throughout the world. Royal tombs. Archaeologists working with Russia's Institute of Archaeology have identified the royal tombs of Prince Dmitry Alexandrovich and Ivan Dmitrievich, both of whom were direct descendants of Alexander Nevsky, the Prince of Novgorod and saint of the Russian Orthodox Church. They were buried inside the Transfiguration Cathedral in Perasavl, one of the oldest stone churches from pre-Mongol Russia. Dmitry died in 1294, and Ivan was buried in 1302. They were first dug up by archaeologists in 1939. They found a space underneath a tombstone, but curiously, no body. And in another part of the church, they found an oak coffin with Ivan's name on the tombstone. It wasn't until excavations between 2014 and 2020 when archaeologists finally discovered a strange stone-white sarcophagus that likely belonged to Dmitry Alexandrovich. The sarcophagus was designed with pre-Mongol traditions from the 13th century. These burials are important because of their connection to Alexander Nevsky, the most diabolical and legendary figure from medieval Russia. But even though the tombs and coffins were found, the bodies seem to be mysteriously missing. Did grave robbers get to the bodies before archaeologists? Story of Goliath. Ancient structures recently discovered by the Philistine city of Gath are changing the way experts and historians see the Bible, and specifically the story of Goliath. It now seems that the giant man may have indeed come from an even more giant city. This is because the remains of supersized structures and fortifications have been found in Gath during an archaeological project. Up until now, most of the excavations at Gath revealed artifacts only from between the 10th and 9th centuries BCE. But this newest excavation revealed a whole unexplored layer of the city dating back to the 11th century BCE, which fits perfectly with the biblical narrative that King to-be David defeated the giant Goliath in that same century. Finding structures dating back to this time is important because it confirms the chronology of the kings of Israel and their descriptions in the Bible. And if David really did fight a giant enemy, he would have done so over 3,000 years ago when the city was a great and powerful capital with walls, tall structures, and a thriving population. Though, unfortunately, no giant skulls have been found just yet. If Goliath was truly a giant, as the story says, his remains have never been excavated. Mass grave in France. In France, archaeologists uncovered a mass grave between July and November of 2020. The grave dates back to the late Neolithic, between 3100 and 2900 BCE. The grave was discovered because of a project to create a bypass in the center of the country. According to the Archaeology News Network, this is the first collective burial from the late Neolithic found in the region. The burial itself makes up a rectangular pit, about 12 feet long and just shy of 6 feet wide. At some point, a rectangular wooden structure had held the bodies. The wood has long since decayed, though evidence of it remains. It had likely been some kind of burial box with a lid that allowed the ancient people to dump more bodies into the pit as need be. As of now, nobody really knows what culture the dead people belong to. There were at least 40 individuals found inside the grave, including adult, children, and teenagers. Hell ants. Archaeologists have made a rather horrifying discovery in the form of a fossil. A creature dubbed the hell ant was found fossilized in the middle of attacking its prey, an ancient relative of the cockroach. The amazing fossil dates back 99 million years. The hell ant is so terrifying because it hunted using scythe-like mandibles and horns. Its mandibles snapped upwards in a devastating vertical motion, savaging its prey. This is much different from modern ants, which move their mandibles horizontally. The hell ant used its mandibles to force its prey against its horn, impaling them. The fossil is extremely important because it is the first piece of evidence ever recorded that proves the insect did this to their unfortunate victims. According to Dr. Philip Garden from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, finding a fossilized hell ant in the midst of an attack is an invaluable discovery. These horrifying insects went extinct about 65 million years ago, along with all the dinosaurs. The Hammer of Thor. Thor's hammer goes much further back than the Marvel comics. In Norse mythology, Thor used his hammer to prevent the giants from destroying Asgard, where he and the other gods lived. The story of Thor and his hammer inspired the Vikings to wear runes and charms for protection. To date, researchers have found thousands of small amulets all over Viking territory. These amulets are known as Torshammer, But researchers, although they believed the amulets to be representations of Thor's hammer, were not 100% sure. It wasn't until just recently, when archaeologists unearthed a Thor's hammer on a small Danish island, that they got some much-needed answers. The artifact was discovered on the Danish island of Lolland. What made it so unique was that it was found with an inscription that read Hamar X is, which of course translated to "This is a hammer." There's no more doubt about it. The amulets were depictions of hammers. Even more fascinating is that according to Peter Pence with the National Museum of Denmark, the Vikings used these hammers for their protective powers. And then during the rise of Christianity, they began wearing hammers and crosses mixed together for double protection. Cattle bone carvings. Archaeologists have discovered what could be the oldest symbols ever drawn by human hand. They found a bone fragment riddled with 6 lines. The lines were engraved on the cattle bone 120,000 years ago. It was discovered by Israeli and French archaeologists at the ancient site of Nesher Ramlah in Israel. According to Yossi Zedner, who was involved in the study, the lines could be the oldest symbolic engravings ever found on the planet. The discovery should help scientists to understand how symbolic expression developed in our species. The markings were found on one side of an otherwise undamaged bone, which has led researchers to speculate that the engravings probably held spiritual meaning. Nobody has any idea what 6 lines on an animal bone could possibly mean, but the symbols were definitely made on purpose. The type of cattle the bone came from is called an auroch, an ancient animal that went extinct 500 years ago. Flint tools were also found near the bone, which researchers say were probably used to make the engravings. Giant foot potato. In an absolutely shocking discovery, farmers in a small Brazilian town discovered a giant 17-pound or 8-kilogram potato that grew into the shape of a human foot. The potato was grown with 5 toes, going from biggest to smallest, just like a human foot. The roots sticking out of the potato look like hair covering the toes. The potato even stands at knee height, looking like the foot of some kind of giant or maybe even Bigfoot himself. According to the retired couple who discovered the spud, they have never seen anything like it before. They have been planting potatoes in their vegetable patch along with their other vegetables for years, but they had no idea that one of their potatoes would grow into such a strange, unbelievable shape. The couple doesn't plan on eating this potato though. They will instead keep it on display as some kind of creepy miracle of vegetation. I don't know, would you eat it? Egypt's wetter climate. A mummified shrew found in Egypt has shed some light on what the country looked like just a few thousand years ago. The remains of the shrew were found at a burial site in Kiesna, inside the Falcon Necropolis. Over 2,000 years ago, the Egyptians were mummifying and preserving animals of all kinds inside the necropolis, shrews being just one example. But what's really amazing is that a lot of the animals here no longer exist in Egypt. According to Neil Woodman with the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History, studying the mummies left behind in this place can show how the environment has changed and what its effects have been on the animals that used to live in Egypt. The shrew is only found today in moist places. This is an animal that does not like living in the desert. It prefers moist wetlands. But that explains why it was found in the necropolis. Scientists have suggested that 2,000 years ago, Egypt was significantly wetter than it is today. This means it hosted a more diversified portfolio of wildlife. It's not exactly clear how Egypt got so dry so quickly, or what animals may have had to do with it, but understanding that Egypt was actually a wetland and not a desert can help change people's false image of this ancient kingdom. Knight's Arsenal. A man with a metal detector made a fascinating discovery in Europe. He found an arsenal of knights' weaponry left over from the biggest recorded battle that took place in medieval Europe. It's known as the Battle of Grunwald, and it was fought between the Polish-Lithuanian forces and the Teutonic Knights during the Teutonic War back in July of 1410. The battle itself took place in territory owned by the monastic state of the Teutonic Order. The order consisted of battle-hardened Germans and Prussians, led by Grand Master Ulrich von Ugingen. But unfortunately for the Teutonic Knights, they were defeated and the Germans were seriously weakened by the loss. As for the discovery, it was found by Alexander Medvedev. He discovered part of a belt buckle, some knives, a sword, and a scabbard, with all the artifacts likely belonging to warriors who died during the battle. For those interested in tracking down even more amazing discoveries from the site of the battle, the exact location has not been given to the public. These weapons were still in shockingly good shape after being lost under a few inches of dirt for 600 years. Headless Vikings. Archaeologists recently found one of the most disturbing discoveries in British history. They found a mass burial site filled with headless Vikings in Dorset. The discovery was made in 2009 during construction. Researchers uncovered about 50 dismembered skeletons, every last one of them decapitated, with their bodies tossed into a shallow grave and their heads piled off to the side. There were also lumps of leg bones and rib cages in separate piles. The men excavated here were most likely Vikings killed by the local Anglo-Saxons. Researchers have no idea how the Vikings came to be decapitated and buried in a pit, but they figure the Vikings could have been invaders captured during an attempted raid. To teach the Vikings a lesson, the Anglo-Saxons chopped off their heads and threw their bodies in a shallow hole. This happened sometime between 910 and 1030 AD. New author of the Dead Sea Scrolls. In one of the most shocking discoveries of 2021, a second author of the Dead Sea Scrolls has been discovered. The Dead Sea Scrolls, in case you didn't know, were found in the late 1940s in Israel and consist of over 900 manuscripts, the oldest remaining physical text from the Hebrew Bible, dating back to between the 4th century BCE and the 2nd century AD. As you can probably imagine, the authors of the manuscripts did not leave their names on the scrolls, but it was kind of assumed that if somebody wrote one of the manuscripts, they did so themselves. But a new study using artificial intelligence has shown subtle differences in the handwriting of one of the scripts. It shows that it was written by at least 2 scribes, although their handwriting is so similar that it's impossible to tell the difference with the naked eye. What this means is that the scribes were probably receiving training at the exact same school or as part of some kind of secret cult. The newest discovery has opened up a universe of possibilities. Researchers are now closer to discovering why the Dead Sea Scrolls were written in the first place and who exactly was behind it. If these scribes were indeed trained to write the scrolls, just which secret organization trained them to do so? Do you have any theories on who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls? What do you think was behind them? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. Then remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already for more intense videos. Shell bead currency. Archaeologists have discovered a very strange form of currency left behind by the Chumash Indians that once lived in the region around what is today Santa Barbara. The currency comes in the form of beads, with the beads being crafted from olive sea snails. According to Professor Lynn Gamble from the University of California, these beads were used for currency during a span of around 1,000 years, starting around the 1st century AD. In other words, the Chumash were using beads as money 2,000 years ago. This dramatically changes our interpretation of these ancient people, who we thought were simple hunters and gatherers may have actually been part of a complex economic society. Also, this could be the first example of money being traded in the Americas from 2,000 years ago. But how do we even know these beads were used as money and not just as decoration? First of all, large amount of beads were found on single individuals buried thousands of years ago, suggesting they hoarded their money. These beads are also significantly larger and more standardized than those used as decoration. This means they were all made to be of equal value. Nobody knows exactly how much a single bead was worth or what it was traded for, but professional archaeologists are starting to accept that the ancient people in the Americas may have had their very own system of currency. Bone weapons. At the end of the Ice Age, the territory known as Doggerland, a chunk of land that once connected Britain to mainland Europe, was flooded. For over 8,000 years, the artifacts of those who had lived on this flooded piece of land were lost beneath the sea. In the 20th century, engineers began to scoop up the sea floor in an attempt to fortify the coastline of the Netherlands. During this war, thousands of artifacts and fossils were uncovered from what was once a thriving region populated by ancient peoples. Among these discoveries were more than 1,000 bone weapons. Archaeologists call these creepy weapons Mesolithic barbed points. They were used for making arrows, spears, and even harpoons. But what makes these weapons particularly fascinating is that they were made from human bone. Of course, some were made out of animal bones, like the bones from local deer, but many of them were fashioned using human skeletons. It's strange because there would have been other materials more readily available, such as antlers. They didn't have any good reason to use human bones in crafting arrowheads and spears other than for symbolic reasons, likely related to the spiritual and social beliefs of the time. What exactly those beliefs were? Scientists have absolutely no idea. All we know is that our ancient ancestors really liked making bone weapons. Europeans in Alaska. Archaeologists working in the Alaskan Arctic may have just discovered artifacts that predate Christopher Columbus arriving in the New World. This discovery is controversial and hasn't really been discussed in professional circles. This is because changing history is hard, and nobody wants to rewrite the history books, even if that very history proves to be wrong. Here's the deal. Blue beads from Europe were recently found in Alaska. The beads are roughly the size of blueberries and were created in Venice, Italy during the 15th century. The beads would have been traded to the east, probably to somewhere in Central Asia along the Silk Road. But then, things get weird. Somehow the beads would have continued going east, probably all the way to Beijing and then beyond across the Bering Strait to Alaska. There are a few issues with the story. Firstly, Elliot Blair from the University of Alabama says that Europeans weren't making beads like this before Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492. He says the glass beads wouldn't have been made until the 16th or 17th century. But despite this, even if the beads arrived in Alaska in the 17th century, they still predate European contact with the natives in Alaska. This suggests that it was actually the Asians living in eastern Russia who met the Alaskan indigenous people first, and maybe even had a trade route established with them. Even if the glass beads didn't end up in Alaska until much later, native Siberians probably had contact with those living in North America far before Christopher Columbus ever showed up with his crew and brought such a massive change into the world. What do you think? Do you think that the Yupik people of Siberia might have known the Inuit of Alaska back in the 16th century? Crystal dagger. A very rare crystal dagger has been discovered in a prehistoric tomb, and it dates back 5,000 years. The discovery was made in Spain by a team excavating an ancient tomb in prehistoric Iberia. What's truly fascinating about the dagger is that it's not made of the traditional stone or flint. It was instead crafted from a special rock crystal. The dagger is about 8.5 inches long and was discovered alongside 10 arrowheads and a small stash of blades, all of them made from rock crystal. Researchers have suggested that whoever owned these weapons paid a hefty price for them. They had likely been an elite individual, possibly a leader or a renowned warrior. Even more interesting is that researchers say the crystal dagger may have been viewed as a magical item. Rock crystal weapons may have been thought by the ancient people to possess powers of vitality. They could have also been used in special rituals. So far, experts don't know exactly who wielded the crystal dagger, or how many of them were ever made, or really what culture this person was even a part of. The Altamura Man. The Altamura Man is one of the most frightening Neanderthal skeletons ever found. His fossilized bones aren't on display in any museum though, and you definitely won't find them in an exhibition near you. Instead, they are still in the exact place where they were found, at the very bottom of a sinkhole near the southern Italian town of Altamura. The bones of the Neanderthal are in the exact same place where they've been for 130,000 years. This guy fell in a cave, down a sort of well, and to his untimely death. His skeleton then became a part of the cave itself, fusing to the very walls. His skeleton was first found in 1993 by cavers. For scientists, it has been frustrating. It takes at least 20 minutes to get through the narrow passage of the cave, not something most scientists are super interested in doing. It can be quite dangerous, and they don't want to end up like the very skeleton they're trying to study, so they have not yet been able to properly study the skeleton. His body is wedged inside of a tiny chamber, barely big enough for a single scientist to do any kind of investigating. Based on photos, videoscope footage, and x-rays that were taken in the depth of the cave, An initial study of the man's jaw, including an almost complete set of teeth, has now been published by scientists. This allows them to suggest that the man was probably a young adult, not that old, and that he had also lost 2 teeth before he fell to his death. According to a researcher from the Department of Biology at the University of Florence, the Neanderthal probably fell down a shaft, then sat in the cave and slowly died of starvation. But what's really amazing is that the guy's skeleton became kind of glued to the cave wall, covered in horrifying calcite mineral deposits, making his bones look truly scary. Do you think the Neanderthal haunts this place now? Biblical archaeology. It's said that the Bible spans 1,400 years of real history. However, some have estimated the Bible actually goes back over 4,000 years. According to Professor Tom Meyer, the Bible and its mysteries can be unraveled by using archaeology. It turns out that archaeology and the Bible may go hand in hand. One of the most powerful examples of how archaeology can confirm the characters from the Bible came in 1933, when a British excavation in the ancient city of Jericho unveiled artifacts that may have belonged to King Eglon of Moab, described in the Book of Judges as the ruler of the Moab society, who teamed up with Ammon and Amalek to attack Israel. There are lots of figures in the Bible that nobody thinks really existed, and yet it seems archaeology is able to change our historical view of the people and events in the book. But what's really strange and more unexplainable than anything is how exactly the Bible was put together over such a long course of time. If the Bible really does span almost 2,000 years of history, who continued writing the book throughout all that time? Or if it was written to include 2,000 years of previous history, what ancient historian was able to track down all of that knowledge in a time when many places on the planet hardly had a system for writing? Unfortunately, this is something scientists can't figure out. What do you think? Roman love god. During the construction of a highway in southwestern England, archaeologists stumbled upon an ancient figurine of an old Roman god. The figurine is in the shape of Cupid, and it dates back 2,000 years. According to Smithsonian Magazine, the figure was also found with a brooch in the shape of a bow. Yes, just like Cupid's bow, and a human skeleton. What you might be surprised about is that at least 50 other Roman Cupid figurines have already been found in the United Kingdom. Thousands of years ago, Cupid was kind of a big deal. The winged god of love was beloved by pretty much everyone. After all, if you had to follow one of the old gods, it might as well have been Cupid. But this discovery yielded some other strange results. For example, the skeleton was discovered buried face down. This was normally a sign of disrespect for the dead, something reserved for criminals or a person disliked by their community. At the same time, the figurine and the ornate brooch were quite sophisticated, suggesting they had been owned by an individual of great wealth. As of right now, nobody knows who this person was or why they were so hated to be buried with their face in the dirt, and truth be told, we may never know. The Philippine fire mummies. The Philippine fire mummies are, without a doubt, some of the scariest mummies anywhere in Southeast Asia. They are also known as the Kabayan mummies, the Abolay mummies, or even the Benguet mummies. They are located in a very rural area of the country, accessible only by a 5-hour car ride up the side of a steep mountain through a series of villages, then 5 more hours up a set of curving stone steps. Quite the journey. The mummies are still inside the Timbuk caves where they were first discovered, curled and scorched inside their original coffins. Scientists believe the mysterious mummies were created by the local Abolay tribe sometime between 1200 and 1500 AD. These mummies got a very different treatment when compared to mummies from places like Egypt. The process began before death. The person ingested an extremely salty drink, then after death, the body was set on fire in the seated position. The fire would dry the fluids. Tobacco smoke would be blown into the mouth to dry the insides of the body, including the organs. Lastly, herbs were rubbed all over the corpse. The entire process took weeks or even months. When it was over, the mummies were buried inside of the caves where they lasted almost 1,000 years. The practice only ended in the 1500s when Spain invaded the Philippines. How do you think the Abolay tribe learned this mummification process? Let me know in the comments below. Nowadays, the mummies are left alone in their caves with little security. The place has been designated as one of the 100 most endangered sites in the entire world. Officials know about 50 to 80 other mummies, but they will not give their whereabouts for fear of vandalism. Locals still pay respects to these exposed mummies to this day, with offerings such as chicken dishes and gin, making sure the dead are well fed and taken care of in the afterlife. There's a small museum in Kabayan that also displays a few mummies. According to the recorded history of Australia, the first foreigners to step foot on the continent were European. The first Dutchman arrived in 1606, and then Captain James Cook claimed the continent in 1770 for the British Empire. But a couple of strange artifacts recently discovered may be flipping that history on its head. The coins were minted by an Islamic civilization no longer around today. The coins were commissioned by the ruler of ancient Kilwa, in what is today Tanzania. They date back to the year 900, suggesting it may have been Arabs instead of Europeans who first stepped foot in Australia. Unfortunately, nobody has found the ruins of an ancient settlement or anything else to suggest early visitors. It could also be that sailors from Africa arrived in Australia, traded some coins to the local indigenous people, then vanished and never found their way back. We don't actually know for certain how the coins ended up on Australian soil, but experts are fairly positive that they were there way before anyone from Europe ever landed. Do you think archaeology can change history as we know it? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and come back again for another fantastic video.